Tonight on Brian Ross Investigates, the other Epstein. New revelations about the leader of a church claiming 5 million members, under indictment and behind bars in California, charged with recruiting underage girls from his congregation for depraved sex acts.
He thinks he's not only an apostle, but he thinks he's the living Christ on this earth.
While he was behind bars, an over-the-top wedding for his daughter, as former church members come forward to allege he has diverted church money for his family's privileged life.
It kind of aggravates me because I know how hard the church members try to give as much as they can.
And now, a growing movement of former church members coming together on social media to reveal what goes on behind the scenes. Is it a church or is it a cult threatening those who would try to leave?
As far as they're concerned, I'm 6 feet underground already because I have gone against the apostle of Jesus Christ on this earth.
Plus, the wave of domestic terror attacks. A former FBI agent is here to tell us what it will take to stop the American carnage. And our shout out, the investigative reporter in Alaska who found dozens of convicted felons hired as police officers still on the job.
Do you think it affects your ability to be a police officer here at all?
Not really.
From the Law and Crime Network studios in New York City's Herald Square, this is Brian Ross Investigates. And good evening and welcome. Tonight, the other Epstein, a wealthy, powerful man accused of sex trafficking with underage girls and now awaiting trial in a jail cell in Los Angeles. This accused sexual predator is a man of the cloth, the leader of a church that claims millions of members in the United States and around the world. His name is Nason Joaquin Garcia, and his arrest has created turmoil among his followers, creating heartbreak and tearing families apart. Raquel Guerra was 14 years old and living in Texas when she was told by her church that she had to marry her boyfriend because they had had sex. They had fornicated, her pastor told her.
I kind of felt like there wasn't really a choice because you're kind of scared of actually going to hell because they really, really put that in your head.
And she says it became a marriage marked by physical abuse and heartbreak, with the church indifferent to her plight.
Maybe it's something that I'm doing to pray to God, maybe to change my ways, that maybe I'm provoking this in some way.
Her church is known as the Light of the World Church, claiming to have 5 million members around the world, with more than 1 million members in the United States, with churches in every one of the 50 states. But California authorities say its supposed strict moral standards don't seem to be followed by the leader of the church, the man who calls himself the Apostle of Jesus, Nason Joaquin Garcia, accused of the very same sort of crimes that Jeffrey Epstein faced.
See his photograph there. And 2 of his co-defendants in a major sex trafficking and sex abuse case.
Joaquin Garcia is now under indictment behind bars in Los Angeles, awaiting trial on charges that he and his followers recruited teenage girls for a series of depraved sex acts.
The type of crimes that belong nowhere in our society. From human trafficking, production of child pornography, oral copulation, rape, statutory rape, child molestation, extortion, conspiracy, and more.
And now former members of the church have begun to organize, using social media, including this site on Reddit, a public effort to expose what they say is the corrupt, hypocritical, and immoral leadership of Joaquin Garcia and his worldwide church.
He's demented. He's not right in the head. He thinks he's not only an apostle, but he thinks he's the living Christ on this earth. When he speaks to his congregation, he literally, when he walks through his walkway, he says, "You have not received me as only as an apostle of Christ. You have received me as Jesus Christ himself."
This man, who we will call Jose, says he became disgusted with the church as he realized the sexual depravity of Joaquin Garcia. He says the church is more like a cult than an actual religion designed to benefit Joaquin Garcia and his family. Joaquin Garcia's grandfather founded the church and was passed on to his son and then to the current leader.
We're taught that you're supposed to love the apostle more than your mom, more than your dad, more than your wife, more than your husband, more than your kids, more than anybody on this earth. Because they compare him with the power of God, the voice of God in flesh here on earth. And you cannot go to the Father or to the Son without going through him first. So they teach you have believed in God in vain. You have believed in Jesus Christ in vain if you don't believe in the apostle on this earth.
And the church spends huge sums on its apostle with elaborate birthday party celebrations. This church in Oregon hosted a big public happy birthday video. The church has built a private zoo and ranch for the apostle in Texas. And even as he was behind bars in California, his daughter was married in an over-the-top wedding in California, to the dismay of many former members.
It kind of aggravates me because I know how hard the church members try to give as much as they can. They go without to be blessed to give such a big offering, and for them to do things of this nature with their hard-earned money.
The church insists its leader, the apostle, is innocent of any wrongdoing, and it has told its followers to pray for Joaquin Garcia to be found not guilty. Church leaders have also told members to shun, to ignore those who speak out against him.
Even if it were your brother, your father, your mother, avoid speaking to them, because their word eat away like gangrene, because it is very dangerous to speak with those people.
The way it works in the church is that if you're not with them, you're against them. The way it works, what they preach is, if you are deviating from the path of the Lord, you're from the devil now. The devil has gotten you. The devil has done everything he could with you. So your conversations, you're pretty much meaningless.
And Jose says when he appeared on the Spanish-language television network Univision this month, his family told him he was essentially dead to them.
Right now, I'm actually a disgrace. Right now, I am no longer a son. Right now, I no longer exist. Right now, I'm actually pretty much a bum on the streets. I'm 6 feet underground already because I have gone against the apostle of Jesus Christ on this earth.
Raquel Guerra says she had to leave the church once she sought a divorce from her husband, causing strains with her family.
I mean, we do talk, of course, but I really don't have a really close relationship with my family. And especially probably after this, I wouldn't be surprised if I'm disowned.
Because you're talking with us right now.
Yes.
That would be seen as a sin?
Oh, it's worse than a sin. It's going against the man of God. It's beyond a sin.
And why are you...
Even talk. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
And so why are you doing it?
Because I'm tired of seeing my family just being deceived. And they really don't see it. As much as you try and tell them, show them facts, they refuse to even consider that this could be a cult.
In a court filing this week, lawyers for Joaquin Garcia claimed he was framed, set up by women who were in love with him and sought to make money by extorting him with what they called false claims. The court papers name one woman who the lawyers say is part of a conspiracy against the church leader. The lawyers declined to appear on our program tonight, but say they will come on next week. We hope they do, as this story seems to be far, far from over. Next, a former top FBI profiler on the recent wave of mass shootings by young, white American males. How to stop the troubling growth of domestic terrorism when we come back. Turning now to the wave of domestic terror attacks in this country, and there really is no other way to describe them. From El Paso to Dayton and so many other places this summer, stores, schools, churches, synagogues, all targeted. The FBI put together a powerful effort in the wake of 9/11 to go after attackers aligned with foreign terror groups. But what about those aligned with or sympathizing with domestic, ultra-nationalistic groups? To answer that question, we are joined by former FBI agent and profiler Andrew Ringel. And Andrew, I'll start by asking you, what can be done to stop them with the current laws?
Well, someone suggested that the laws are not strong enough, and there needs to be a domestic terrorist act, a violation that specifically targets domestic terrorism, including the FBI Agents Association. I would make the argument that we've worked domestic terrorist cases going back to the 1920s, and these cases have been made on a number of different violations. So while there may not be a specific federal statute that says that this is a terrorist event, a domestic terrorist event, there are a number of cases. For example, in the Pittsburgh shooting, Robert Bowers was charged with 29 federal counts. But I think there can be a lot done to prevent these cases from occurring with better prevention programs for these types of cases, better reporting. And we're seeing that just in the wake of the shootings in Mississippi and Texas and Ohio and California. There have been 28 arrests in the month of August of individuals who have made threats, either through social media or directly to people that they know.
Well, Andrew, do you think these cases are getting the same attention from Washington, from the FBI headquarters, and from the White House as the international terror cases?
I really do, Brian. I think that what you're seeing in the last several weeks as a reaction to those shootings I just mentioned, and you see the same thing happen with the Amerithrax case that came right after 9/11. I was a headquarters supervisor at the time in the Weapons of Mass Destruction division, or the unit, and we had about 400 hoaxes, anthrax hoaxes, before the Amerithrax case. But after that actual terrorist event, anyone that was making a hoax was arrested. And you saw the same uptick in international investigations, proactive ones, after 9/11. So it's natural that you're going to see those types of proactive investigations being ramped up in the Bureau throughout the United States. And that's what we're seeing with the 28 arrests.
And Andrew, a question for you from our control room from executive producer Rhonda Schwartz. Rhonda, what's your question?
What's the fine line between trying to profile, trying to predict who might do this kind of terrible act, and the civil rights of citizens? Where do you draw that line?
Rhonda, that's an excellent question. And at the heart of the issue, whether or not to have a domestic terror statute, those on the civil liberties side and the social justice side says if we have that type of statute, that the Bureau might be tempted to cross that line and look at people's ideology and the way of thinking. Director Wray said the FBI doesn't go after groups because of the way they think or their philosophy or ideology. The FBI goes after their criminal behaviors. And all you have to do is look at the statute, the definition of terrorism, and the very first sentence says unlawful violence against people or property. So I think that there is some things that can be done. For example, if you hear someone using inappropriate communications, they're making specific threats online or in person. Those are red flags, and these red flag operations will allow the police to get left of the boom. And that's really where we want to be. We want to be responsive before there is a crime committed. So the FBI, local and state police, and these task forces that are looking at these issues, they want to be left of the boom. The local population can be a big help to that end.
And when you say left of the boom, what do you really mean?
Well, if you look at a timeline of events, Brian, we read left to right. So if you look at the timeline as the event, the critical incident or terrorist attack, that's the boom. Law enforcement wants to be left on that timeline. What we'd like to do is the 3 Ps. So we want prevention, we want prediction, and at the last resort, we want to have a prepared response. So the public can really help by being the eyes and the ears in the community, and where these individuals are going from an expressed belief to a stated behavior. They're doing preparatory work. They're going out and developing hit lists. They're going online and expressing violent intentions. Those are the red flags that should be brought up to local, state, or federal law enforcement so that they can get in the stream of consciousness of that offender and determine whether there's seriousness in terms of these overt statements and actions, and then determine whether or not they need to neutralize that individual by an arrest or a disruption before there's a boom.
Right, that's right. Last week, there were 3 cases where loved ones, former girlfriends, came forward and said, he's talking about killing people at a synagogue or a community center. That's the kind of information you can use. But if someone buys lots of guns, that's not in itself illegal.
No, and that's why there's no profile for these types of events, Brian. I think that it's dangerous to talk about profiling of behaviors because there isn't one specific type of individual. And when you look at terrorism specifically, the definition says it has to be in furtherance of political or social objectives. So if you have someone who's mentally or emotionally unstable and they go into a tower and start shooting people, a mass shooting, then if they're doing that because of mental illness or because of a personal revenge, a grievance, then it's not terrorism. And here we get a lot of confusion as to what is a terrorist case and what's a hate crime and what's just, a crazy person going in and shooting a bunch of people.
Good point. Former FBI agent Andrew Ringel, thank you so much for joining us. Excellent insights. Up next, our shout out for the Alaska reporter who first discovered convicted felons were being hired as police officers in some of the state's remote villages. Dozens of them, it turns out, when we come back. And our shout out tonight is an encore for one of the few investigative reporters working in Alaska, the 49th state. A reporter who we first recognized for revealing how convicted felons were able to get jobs as police officers in some of the state's remote villages. But over the summer, he stayed on the story like a good reporter, with some even more alarming findings that led powerful people in Washington to finally take notice.
My name is Kyle Hopkins. I'm a reporter and an editor for the Anchorage Daily News in Anchorage, Alaska. A lot of the stories that we want to cover and a lot of the best stories are in these far-flung villages that are hard for us to get to. There are all these small communities with all these small governments, and they work, in the shadows. They do what they like because there's no one paying attention because their communities just are not large enough to support a local journalist. I found that again and again, you would see someone who had been accused of domestic violence or even rape or homicide, and you would also find that person had at one point and sometimes still was serving as the village police officer.
As Hopkins discovered when he traveled to this village above the Arctic Circle, the village of Selawik, population 850. On a November night 3 years ago, someone gave alcohol to 16-year-old Lois Cleveland and then raped her.
She died that night, and while the medical examiner called it undetermined reasons, when Alaska State Troopers investigated, they found that she had handcuff marks on her wrists.
And the state police soon determined that the village police officer who reported the crime, Brent Norton, was in fact the one who committed the crime. In an interview recorded by state police, Norton admitted he had given her liquor and had sex with her while she was unconscious.
Did you do anything to her while she was passed out?
Yeah, I did.
What did you do?
I thought she was wanted to be with me, and I just tried to have sex with her.
It was not his first crime, Hopkins discovered.
A simple background check showed that he already had been convicted of bootlegging, and he was on probation for giving alcohol to another underage girl. So, had been gone through the criminal justice system, was accused of and found to be guilty of a crime, and was still on the job. Used his city paycheck to buy alcohol that he then gave this girl. He raped her.
The young victim's mother was distraught.
We're supposed to be helping, not furnishing and taking her life or her childhood. Who hired him? How come they let him work?
And then Hopkins set out in the state capitol to ask the officials in charge if there were other police officers like Norton, convicted of serious crimes but still on the job.
And the response from this regulatory body, and their job is to keep track of this stuff, was, we have no idea. They didn't know. They said no one knew.
So that led to a full-fledged effort by Hopkins and the Anchorage Daily News to find out more, with a new report just last month, which found dozens of police officers with criminal records, including, Hopkins reported, this registered sex offender, Nimmeron Mike, who was hired as a police officer even after serving 6 years behind bars on charges including assault, domestic violence, vehicle theft, groping a woman, hindering prosecution, reckless driving, drunken driving, and choking a woman unconscious in an attempted sexual assault. He was hired by the city of Stebbins on the same day he applied, according to Hopkins. Another police officer told Hopkins his criminal record would not keep him from enforcing the law.
Do you think it affects your ability to be a police officer here at all?
Not really.
And earlier this year, new Attorney General William Barr came to Alaska and declared a law enforcement emergency.
Someone asked me why are you here? Why did you pick Alaska? And it's because, to me, my job is to go where the need is greatest, and I think the need is greatest here. These are people that are just asking for the basic physical security, and it's not much to ask.
It felt like it's a story that I had been missing and had been right in front of my face for years, and we just finally need to address this. That's really how it felt. Was like, we should have done this years ago. Let's get this done and just tell people what's going on.
And he has. He is the recipient this year of a grant from the nonprofit ProPublica to continue his reporting as a kind of one-man wrecking ball against apathy and corruption.
I appreciate you putting a spotlight on local reporting. It's it's lonely. It's a lonely job. Nobody wants it out here, so it's nice to talk to somebody about it.
And good to talk to you. So a second and well-deserved shout out for Kyle Hopkins and the Anchorage Daily News, and for the nonprofit news group ProPublica, which has helped to support Hopkins' work as part of a 20-member local news network around the U.S., filling a very large void in the world of journalism. Well, that's our program for tonight. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back here next week. Good night.